Another episode of Standpoint. I'm Gabe Groisman, and today we've got a really great guest. Nissim Black is joining us straight from Jerusalem. Nissim is really one of a kind. He's a rapper and a singer, originally from the inner city of Seattle. His first hit, from what I could tell, was back in 2006. He hit the hip hop scene as D Black, converted actually to Judaism in 2013, moved to Jerusalem, lives there now with his wife and I believe 7 kids. Had the pleasure of meeting him last week when I was in Jerusalem, and he was kind enough to join us. He's been making a huge impact, not just in the hip hop community, but now in the Jewish community, in the Jewish world. His perspective, his standpoint, which is what the show is about, is truly, truly unique. He's got a new album that just came out. He's got an HBO Max special called Motherland Bounce coming out about his story, which is really unique. And Nissim, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on, man. Really appreciate it.
First of all, I'm happy to see you got your voice back, because when I saw you, you were voiceless and you were about to perform a show the next day. And you said to me in a whisper, I don't know how I'm going to do this show. How'd that go?
Miracle upon miracle of miracles. No, that was very difficult for me. It's one thing when a person loses their voice, but when you use your voice for a living, you understand, it's a different type of losing your voice. So no, it's very scary, but I'm happy. I'm not 100%, by the way. And I don't know if it's ever taken this long for me to get my voice back. So
I don't want to tell you this. You don't want to hear this, man, but it comes with age. when we're younger, everything bounces back pretty quick, right? But with time, things take a little bit longer. But you definitely got to take care of yourself. Your voice is special, not just in your performances, but in the things you say and in your perspective. I really wanted to jump straight in. I mean, this is the week of an election here in the U.S. You're still an American citizen. I know you follow American politics and what's going on in pop culture here. You didn't once, but now you do again. We'll talk about that a little bit. And I really just want to start talking about your perspective on the Black community in America, which always comes into focus around election time, but this time even more. Historically, the Black Americans vote for Democrats. This year, it looks like it's going to be a swing. Yesterday, some polls came out trying to temper that, but the numbers will come in just in a week or so. But definitely with Black men across America, it seems like there's a big push supporting Trump. Tell me, how do you think the Black community is looking at this election as a whole?
Well, really, it's split up. There's Black men and then there's Black women. And I don't think it's germane to the Black community, but I think it's everybody. People tend to vote emotionally, more so by women. Women vote more emotionally than men do. And because the Harris campaign, not only the Harris campaign, we'll just talk about Democrats. I don't know for how many upteenth years have been running their campaigns on emotions. And the more and more emotional they've gotten, I don't know if anybody noticed this trend. They did recently a poll showing that Black men, by and large, migrating all the way from the time of Obama. I mean, he was a very, very popular president. But already by the time of his second term, we started to see this shift of Black men leaving the Democratic Party or starting to vote more red. What's interesting about that is that happened during the time of Obama, right? So this was like this major time. But what we start to see is that the campaigning of the Obama administration from the first time to the second time was already different than languages, and it became more and more emotional. And what's interesting, as a kid, I never noticed all of this, how emotional, they run their campaigns. And it's not to say that on the right or Trump's not doing this emotion, but there's a certain logic to what's going on there. And there's a reason why overall he's resonating more with men, I guess the alpha males, and particularly in the Black community, because what we've seen is that, we've seen that Black men are moving towards the Republican Party because they're less caught in their emotions. And the less they're caught in their emotions, the more and more they're going to keep moving towards the right. So it's a very interesting it's an interesting dynamic. But that's what's happening. The Black community also has been paying attention. I think what happened was they overcompensated in 2020. What happened was George Floyd dies, and there's the re-rise of Black Lives Matter, right? You have this. It's very interesting how they say this, but you have this surge of Black everything, Black characters in the movies, Black this, Black. It was all over the place, and everybody started to feel this great, like, oh, maybe this is like, finally our time, so to speak. I've heard people actually talk like that. And then when you've seen that after the election died down, everything shifted. It was more about transgenderism, LGBT, more than like, and that black narrative sort of like it left, and it was so fast and so in your face. I think that Democrats really did a disservice with themselves by showing how bad they were actually using, getting the emotions all riled up, and then seeing that, and everybody felt like, and I think that this is the overall sense, especially by black men, and saying is it's like we just got used. We just got used. In addition to showing that Black Lives Matter was like a complete hoax, as a campaign. So I think that that's really what you've seen by and large in the community.
Yeah, and how do you react? Let's talk about you in particular. I mean, when I grew up in the 80s and 90s, color really was not a thing. Okay, there were blacks and whites. We played basketball together all the time. Jews, non-Jews, we would hang out. It wasn't really a thing. Actually, to be liberal at that time really meant to be colorblind, right? To not care, just judge people by the content of their character.
Right.
Even today, when I educate my kids about racism, I say to be racist, you have to be stupid, right? You have to be stupid to think that by looking at someone's skin color, you would know anything about them, right? Everybody inside is their own individual, and you have to judge them by who they are. But I'm seeing now a total reversion of that. That in a way, it really takes me aback, because if you just look at like the Harris campaign, for example, where they'll have white dudes for Kamala, black dudes for Kamala, this, dividing us again over and over, and all the discussion in sort of the woke pop culture that we're seeing and political culture that we're seeing from the left, where in a way to try to supposedly elevate the minority communities, like the black communities, they're separating them. And in my mind, reverting us back to a time that we've tried so hard to get away from, which is separating people into their own corners based on these superficial things like race.
Yeah, no, what you're saying is absolutely true. I don't remember who said it. Somebody on the right, maybe Candace, who I'm not so fond of these days. I think it said that there's a very interesting thing of, that the progressive movement, the progression has led to a digression. Like we're digressing as a society. The more and more that, and I said this a while back. I was brought on the Ben Shapiro show, and people got very upset when I said it. It was like at the height of everything that was going on in 2020. And I talked about racism, and I specifically said the words that it's there when you look for it. The more and more you bring this up, the more and more you're going to have a race issue. And this is the reason why I say it's even more of a digression. By constantly shoving in the face, you tell a person, let me take an individual, and you tell them you're angry, and they're like, I'm not angry. And you keep pestering that person, walking after them everywhere they go, saying, you're angry. No, you're an angry person. You're really upset. After a while, you may get the person angry. You understand what I'm saying? Even though they were not really angry before. And I think that that's what's happening in politics today, and specifically from, this progressive movement, where they have made race such an issue, and they're telling everybody, you're racist, you're racist, you're racist. And I have not seen Matt Walsh's movie or anything like that, but like, you're racist, and you're telling everybody they're racist until they become racist. They start to feel, some type of animosity towards the black community because you're shoving this in my face. Oh, you're homophobic, you're xenophobic, you're this, and they keep pushing it in your face until actually what you cause is the very thing that was not really present before, but you created this thing now today where people actually do start to feel some bit of tension between the races, and I think that that's exactly what they're trying to do. Almost, I don't think that it's because the whole entire thing is that if I can divide you, I can conquer you, right? And we know that the left and Democrats are all about government. They're all about power and remaining in power, and the power being by the government and not by the people. So in order for them to actually conquer, I need to divide you. I need to convince you that Donald Trump is racist. He's a fascist. He's nuts. I'm going to get you so riled up in your emotions and every single thing that I can, and I'm going to divide you. I'm going to polarize, this side to that side or whatever. So at the end of the day, you have to come into my arms. And I think that this is what's going on more than anything. But you're definitely right. It's a digression of where we came from. I'm a big fan of Larry Elder, and I've actually been able to become friends with him. We haven't met him in person, but we've talked a little bit over the last year and a half or so. Larry Elder always brings this up when he speaks. Not always, but a lot of times I heard him actually speak about this, a study that they did back in the 90s where kids were asked, if racism was a major, issue in society. Absolutely. And a lot of people said, yeah. So what happens is after a while, what happens after a while is that, I think they was in the same survey. They asked them, how much in their day-to-day life has racism, actually affected them. This was the most groundbreaking thing I had heard, throughout, what was going on since 2020, because I thought about it myself, how much, I grew up feeling this sort of like, and being taught that the man or the white man, they look, they're racist and they're trying to keep you down and they're oppressing you, systemic racism and all the racism, all this other stuff, right? So I grew up that way. And like I said, once I started coming back into what was going on and everything in the world and the police brutality, and that was sort of like the thing that they were using to hinge off and George Floyd, everything. And I grew up, in a world where I wasn't afraid of the police unless I was doing something wrong, right? That's when I was afraid of the police. I was afraid of the police when I knew that I was doing something wrong. Other than that, I was more deathly afraid of the guys that were on the other side of the town that I had a problem with because I was from one side of the neighborhood and they were from the other side of the neighborhood. I was more afraid of the guys that, had beef and they all looked like me. So that's the world that I grew up in. So all of a sudden, now that the police brutality and the whole everything else that's going on, so you've sort of seen them like shift what's your reality and like I said, recently in the videos, because I wasn't indoctrinated recently by all these movies and everything else that's been going on in the past few years. I'm not desensitized to what was a standard truth that everybody held by, you know what I'm saying, 20 years ago, 15 years, 30 years ago, because I was out of the loop. So seeing this has been really, really disturbing for me. And it feels like the race, and it's not that racism doesn't exist. I don't believe that racism doesn't exist. But when you grow up in a world like where they're pushing it on you nonstop, and then all of a sudden, after I remember hearing this Larry Elder thing, I was like, you know what? Even if I would tell you right now that yeah, the racism is a big problem, I can't think of a time anybody ever was racist to me. Like somebody said something to me, like growing up as a kid, I never experienced anything like that. I'm not saying maybe on the East Coast and down South, people maybe had issues, but I come from the Pacific Northwest. We hug trees and drink coffee, and I don't smoke weed, but I did when I was a teenager. But I'm saying, like, we love everybody, kumbaya, whatever. So for me to actually feel like I was oppressed or somebody, it was nonsense after a while. The two things don't add up.
Yeah, it seems like it's something that, at least from my perspective, where I sit, and I understand I'm an outsider from that community, but it seems as a whole that people are rejecting that. People are rejecting that in the Black community. They're rejecting it in the Latin community. In fact, they're rejecting it, interestingly, in the Arab American community as well, especially on the
Mhm,
man's side, on the talking about Arab men voting now, pushing towards the Republican side, which is really tremendous. Uh,
mhm,
really, I think it's more of a testament to how bad Harris is for that perspective. But really, all those communities don't really jive with woke culture, right? When we're talking about,
right,
mixing of the genders and all these things that are just way a bridge too far. And in these communities, even though people are farther away from the church these days than they ever have been in the Black community. I spoke about this. I was 2 weeks ago. I was on a show with his name is Dr. Benjamin Chavis. He was the former head of the NAACP, worked for Martin Luther King. He has a show on PBS, and he had me on talking about Black-Jewish relations. And there's one part of the interview that I spoke about something that they edited out, and I wish I had the original footage of it where we spoke about, just to go back to what we said earlier, when I really go after the anti-racist movement, which is what the woke culture calls what they're doing to try to correct racism. And there's no way to be anti-racist without being racist, right? Because you're making
right.
decisions based on people's race as opposed to anything else.
Mhm,
And they cut that out. He actually, I don't want to put him out there, but he agreed with me on it, or seemed to have at least agreed with me on it. It's hard to disagree about it. But look, what you have a real interesting perspective, because you kind of have lived two lives. It's one life, but you've lived two totally different chapters of your life. Right? You grew up in Seattle, like most people know. If you do any research about you, you've been pretty open about it. Your parents were drug dealers. You grew up in a real difficult environment. You got into rap. It was more like gangster rap originally.
mhm,
And then when you can go through the journey of when you started looking for something, you converted. I don't know if you converted, but you think you converted to Islam first because you had an uncle, I think, who was Muslim, and then you ended up converting to Judaism, moved to Jerusalem. And the part that's most interesting to me is, and I'm familiar with this with Orthodox conversions, where you disconnected from everything that you could disconnect from of your life past. So it kind of gave you like a hard stop on that, so you wouldn't be influenced by your past, and you can have a clear future. But then you, like you said yesterday in your video, during COVID, you had to reconnect with the world, mostly because you needed internet, you needed to connect, and we needed to work from home. Your kids needed to go to school from home, and it kind of gave you a new window. So it's almost like you left the planet and you came back to the planet. How have you seen, from your perspective, from the Black community in the United States, if no one could speak, it's not a monolith, but for the whole community, but what perspective do you bring from that community of what has changed politically from when you kind of went offline to when you came back?
Well, before I didn't really pay attention to politics as much. I was one thing I should probably really be honest about is that I've always kind of been a one issue voter from the moment that I was already of legal age to vote. By that time, right, because we were in the middle of our election, I turned 20 right around. Okay, so 2008, I think, would have been the first year that I'd have been able to vote. That was also the year that my life was beginning to drastically change. You mentioned, so Islam was, as a result, my grandfather was a Sunni Muslim. I prayed with him 5 times a day. He came to live with us as a kid. So I was maybe 8 or 9 years old. So that was an introduction to religion as a lifestyle. I had uncles and different things that were pastors and different things like that, but I didn't grow up with that because it just wasn't a part of my upbringing. My upbringing was the streets, was drugs, was what was going on inside of my house. Although, in my parents' defense, that was not the lifestyle. It wasn't completely like Hefker. My parents did not want that for me. That was not the lifestyle they wanted for me. It was just what I saw. I was sort of raised like, do as I say, not as I do, type of thing. There was still some type of feeling of like them knowing that the way that they were living was dysfunctional. So with that, later on, by the time I was 13, I converted to Christianity, and that was life changing for me at that time because I was getting in a lot of trouble. I was finding myself running with all the wrong people, gangs. I started selling drugs myself, and I was already expelled from the Seattle school district and everything else. I was already, not having such a good trajectory. What happened after that was, life went on. I went into high school, and by the time Judaism had happened, I'd already been into a kill or be killed situation, beef with another rapper, the whole everything. So 2008 hits around. By 2008, I lost and that was when they increased. And it's crazy thinking about this. They increased the funding. They took it away over the years. They started shaving away from the faith-based programs, which were actually helping people like me in the streets, right? Helping people, kids like us who were getting in trouble, staying up, they sort of shifted that money, right? From that, they took away, stripped the funding from that. So all these camps and things that were actually very impactful after school programs and all that really started to diminish. And where they placed the money or allocated the budget was towards the gang units and towards the policing that was going on at that time. Which, obviously you're going to have an increase of gangs, the less activities you're giving them to deter them from those things. So you increase the gang unit, you're going to increase, violence or whatever have you. So 2008 was an interesting year. I'm starting to find, refine religion again. So I naturally went back to Christianity after being in that be killed situation. And at that time, I'm rediscovering faith altogether. I'm coming towards Judaism. I'm starting to learn more about Israel, and this love I begin to develop for the Jewish people through learning as now of evangelical Christian. Later on, led me to coming to Judaism later in life. But already by that time, in 2008, what was happening in 2007 into 2008 was now I'm able to vote. My issue became a one thing issue: Israel. That was it. That was the only thing that I was taking to the ballot that year in 2008. My first year is because life has been radically changed. I become a Christian. So already from then, I was not voting Democrat, even though I grew up in Seattle, even though that was like the natural path out of them. But already I was starting to shift. So shortly after this, 2009, 2010, that's really 2009, I really kind of logged off from the world. Like I missed, it's funny, he's Jewish, but Drake's whole career, I missed it. Like I was I bowed out.
Some people would consider that a blessing.
Yeah, because whatever. I missed that whole run of Drake. You understand that? So that's how far I was out. I had already thrown away all of my secular CDs. I sold my TV, sold my Xbox, got rid of everything. And so, just to give you more of a perspective. So 2016, whatever. Already in my head, I'm a conservative. My father's actually. It was interesting. My father's a pastor. My biological father. I was not raised within the house, but he was always been a wonderful and awesome role model in my life. Um, told me, I remember he said, we're conservative. We are conservative. It's, he introduced me to the idea of the Democrats being the party of slavery and everything else. And that was something that was in my head, but I didn't care about anything except for Israel. So by the time everything rolls around and I'm back online and I'm seeing everything that's going on, my number one concern is Israel. But now I'm starting to look at the world a little bit different. Like, how's all of a sudden Donald Trump racist? What was the whole everything? So I start to really dig in, and I'm starting to see more and more Black conservatives, and I'm listening to Black liberals. And I was doing this. I was on everything. I wasn't like I was just like, okay, I'm gonna go over here and I'm gonna listen to these talking points. I went to see what was going on both of what was going on. And it was so like I couldn't understand why there was any type of toss up. It's like after October 7th, like, what's the question here about more, moral equivalence? It's like these things, like, to me, are like crazy. It's a different perspective. So I know it's a long answer, but for me, by the time it came to 2020, again, whatever it was, next time I voted for Donald Trump. And here 2024, voted for Donald Trump. And it's more so the issues of, like, I'm a God guy. You know what I'm saying? I am a Hashem first. I am biblical morality. The Bible will always be my moral compass of how I see the world. So I couldn't say that there was such a shift, but I did see, like, growing up, my mindset prior to religion, and I would say Christian Judeo, because it started off as Christianity and then later on into Judaism, pushed me to be more conservative, and that followed me to the ballot box.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different places to dive into from your answer. But first of all, what I see in society as a whole, if you look at the protests that you've seen over the years, whether it's BLM, whether it's the women protests after Trump was elected, whether it's the protests in favor of Ukraine or now in favor of Hamas, all those people that are protesting, and some are right, some are wrong. Not everybody thinks the same, but almost all of them share one thing in common. First of all, there's a lot of overlap between the protesters.
Yeah.
But one thing that you see in common, a common strand throughout all of it, is people that are really looking for something. I mean, if you go and talk to a lot of these students that are protesting today, where smart kids, but they can't see, black is white and white is black, right and wrong are inverse. There's a lot written about that in biblical texts.
They also don't know that chocolate milk doesn't come from brown cows. Also, that's a separate argument.
Yeah, but what I do think, though, and I have lots of evangelical friends, because they're mostly because of their work for the Israel community, so I've become very close with lots of different evangelical groups and leaders, and they agree with me on this. I'm not sure what your perspective is, but I really think there's a moment right now in this country, in the United States, for religion. People are looking for something. People are looking for something to grab onto. What's their purpose in this world? Sort of the whole postmodernism movement, which leaves you empty. And I feel like, as I hear you speaking, when you had a very different, you had a different on-ramp to get into that moment where you say, wait, I need something more in my life, which is why you sort of went on this search for meaning and for religion. But how do you see that now? I mean, you're still in touch with people in the US and around, you're still touring. I want to talk about your new album and your movie that's coming out, or your series that's coming out. But, are you seeing that as well? You think are people being drawn to religion? I mean, obviously you're someone that I would think see a lot of that, given what you're doing, how you look. You walk around, for those listening, instead of watching, Nissim walks around like a total Hasidic Jew, ultra Orthodox Jew, with a beard and a hat and payas and a black kapata, a long jacket, the whole getup. So I feel like people would want to talk to you about that. What have you heard about that, or what have you seen about people being drawn these days to religion, whichever religion that is?
It's interesting you say that, because one of the things we believe, and I think, if I remember right, Christian eschatology says something very similar. I'm shifting now through my head through the Islamic hadiths. So there's a place where at least the three Abrahamic religions meet at this. But germane for me personally is what it says in Judaism. is that there has to be, before this light and this spiritual awakening, which I would think we will all hope is that final revival, whatever that is to other people in the world, that final awakening where we all enter into this utopian place of bliss and connection with God and oneness with God, which we call the coming of Mashiach, right? And the building of the third temple. But what has to happen, and this is this is the way we look at and view eschatology, meaning end time studies, but this is also the way that it happens in everybody's life, to some degree, some in varying degrees, is that before there is a light, before there is this enlightenment, the spiritual enlightenment and revival, whatever you want to say, inside a person's life, usually there's a breakdown which causes it. There's usually some type of trouble or pain or stressful, whatever it is, situation in that person's life that causes them to start to say, "Hey, I need to figure out who I am, where I'm going." And these questions, the more they intensify and the deeper that they get, the person finds themselves on this, what we would call today a spiritual journey towards something, which happened to me, which happens to a lot of people. It's more so prevalent, I would say, amongst Christians, and in Islam happens a lot. A lot of people, convert to religion in prison. It's like is a huge thing, especially for Islam. I think is got to be one of the leading places to where they come from. Not to say anything, but it's
Even
just,
Mike Tyson.
huh?
Even Mike Tyson, when he was in
Even Mike
prison,
Tyson,
converted.
right? My grandfather, who was a Sunni Muslim, he wasn't a black Muslim like Farrakhan or any other guys or Nation of Islam. My grandfather was a Sunni Muslim. He prayed in Arabic, wrote in Arabic, and prayed 5 times a day. He grew up as a Christian, but he converted to Islam in prison. He spent most of his time in prison. So it happens sometimes when a person hits this place in life. And Judaism is generally not like that. It's not usually what happens. The other religions sometimes, and Christianity, I would say more so, usually serves as that stepping board for people who convert at least to Judaism. But sometimes it happens in life. People find God when things are low. And what we're seeing right now in society, there's a breakdown of society, right? Um, you know, and it just is what it is. A trans person teaching a child, having reading time with them, in a public school setting, a biological male beating up a woman inside of a boxing ring, and you're starting to see this crazy breakdown of society. People identifying as dogs. You're seeing a total breakdown where everybody sees there's a major breakdown in society, even if you're on the progressive side and you think that things are going south, right? No matter what side you're on, like you said, things are going south and people see it. And we see it with how many people are diagnosed with clinical depression and how many people are depressed. And these things are at an all-time high. There's more, despite the inflation and everything else, there's more financial success in the world than there was in previous years. There's more access and information to things than there were in previous years. So we have this overload of abundance given in this generation, but at the same time there's this major depression and sadness and gloom and fighting and conflict, and that symbolizes to me that major breakdown before something great happens, before this enlightenment, before this use a revival. I'm trying to use English words over here, but I think that you're right, to the sense of saying that, listen, right now everybody's searching for something, and this is what really is going on here. It's like everybody has this cause that they want to be behind, whether I agree with it or not. Whether you have Black Lives Matter, or we need to stand up for this, we need to be pro Palestine, we need to be pro something. Everybody wants to be a part of something bigger than themselves, and that's what everybody's looking for. So everybody's trying to find this. And I think what ultimately, like we're talking about here, is everybody's searching for that connection to God and to faith and to religion. Because the only real, and we've seen this with addiction in the past. My father, I think, he actually had an addiction program for faith-based organization, Union Gospel Mission. I was a part of the organization when I was younger, not that side, but we had relationship with them, and I saw my mother go through treatment. And I seen, and people knew then and people know now, the best organizations to help people be clean of drugs and addictions or faith-based programs. It just is what it is. Um, that's the only thing that really gives a person true fulfillment in life. A person that's on fire for God, a person that's on fire for the faith, and they live in that space, whatever, that's an unmovable person. And it presents a challenge for people who are not in that world, who want to manipulate and control people, because once a person has that intact and feels very strong or good, that person's very confident. They have happiness in their life. They have joy in their life. So everybody wants that. They don't necessarily always know that that's what they want, but I think we are in a place right now where it could be. I have this question all the time: is God still in America after everything that's going on?
Yeah, look, I suffer from a severe case of optimism, which I think you alluded to a little bit, right? This is a moment that's coming before big things that are going to happen, whether it's messianic times or not. It's still just, there's so many quotes, so many songs that come to mind, right? Of, before going high, you have to have a low. But of course,
Right.
there's difficulties that come with it. And just to respond to one thing, which I know but others don't, is that Judaism, where I think the only religion that doesn't actively recruit. It's actually the opposite. If you
Right.
want to convert to Judaism in the proper way, they have to reject you at least 3 times and make it difficult for you. And it's, part of the argument is you go to the same heaven as Jews do. You have the same afterlife, the same success in this world and in the next world. As long as you abide by only 7 Noahide laws versus all of ours. So that's sort of why. But within the Jewish religion, we're seeing also a lot of people coming back to the religion in a time where the world is upside down and anti-Semitism's through the roof. And just to talk one note about that, Nissim, is you moved to Jerusalem. There's obviously Ethiopians in Jerusalem, big, beautiful Ethiopian community that's well adjusted. Many friends in the Ethiopian community. By the way, the best meals I've had in Jerusalem was in the middle of the Ethiopian neighborhood in Jerusalem, in my friend's mom's house. But you moved there as a Black American, and there's all this talk online about Israel being racist. And just what has your experience been like? You've been there, if I'm not mistaken, 10 years, 11 years in Israel already. How have you been welcomed there with you and your family? What has the experience been like?
Right. So yeah, I've been here going on 9 years now, and what's interesting is that we left. One of our main reasons for leaving America is because we wanted to raise our children very strongly Jewish. By the time I moved there, I think I have 4 children. I have 7 now, as you mentioned before. We wanted to raise our children with very, very strong Jewish values. And not only Jewish values, we wanted to raise them with Torah values. We wanted them to be all in for Hashem, all in for God, for Judaism. And what we saw by being in America was that, you know, kids, no matter what the color is, what the race is, as time goes on, they have these identity crisis, of trying to just figure out who they are in general. And I think that would be much more so if you're in a community where you don't look like everybody who's in that community. You're going to have the identity crisis plus, right? Of trying to figure out and trying to align yourself. And I saw just from some of the other people and stories that I heard is that sometimes when these kids became teenagers who, were a color, who were Black, or, had a Black background, they tend to want to identify with Black America, Black American society. So we saw it was very, very important and crucial to move our kids to Israel, where they could see other Jews of color, right, who were all in for Hashem, where the values of their life was Judaism. So when their kids, God forbid they have to, but when they do have these, wanderings of trying to find themselves, when they look around at other Jews of color, they're going to identify with Torah. They're going to identify with, with Hashem and with Israel. So we moved here, and even before I moved to Israel, even before I convert, everybody told, oh, they're going to be racist, they're going to be this, they're going to be that, and whatever. And I will definitely admit, I've definitely experienced some racism. But it was more so, it wasn't from Israel, in the very religious communities, people are very close. It's very paper thin, though, the racism here. It's not like it is in America. In America, you have a very different type of racism when you do encounter it, because which is different. I wouldn't even say racism, is prejudice, right? So prejudice comes from, having a stereotype of what you are and where you come from and where your background is. Over here, when I experienced things over here, it wasn't that deep. It's just you look different than me. So a kid's gonna say something to another kid or different things like that. But it's not like racism with this idea where they're trying to keep me down or nobody wants me to progress on it. It's like, no, dude, you look different and you're gonna get it just like the guy who comes to Man Shine with the blue shirt on, he's also gonna get it. And the person whose wig isn't long enough, she's also gonna get it.
Well, I was thinking the same thing. I have a friend who studied in a yeshiva in a Torah study center in Mea Shearim, which is the largest ultra orthodox community, or at least the most well known one in Jerusalem. And I went dressed in like a settler, let's say, with sandals and a big bright kippah and no beard. And I walked in, and it's like I came off of a spaceship. That's how everyone was looking at me.
Right. I mean, because really, this community by and large is in a space and time of its own. They have no idea, no, real contact with the outside world. So anything new that comes in, they're like, "What's going on here?" As opposed to where, I know everybody says, not everybody, but at least like one of the strong points for the left, only here in Israel over there, is that, oh, the Ethiopian Jews or whatever. I mean, they were doing much better than us. I mean, you come in as a chassid with a shtreimel with everything else, they're like, really, this guy's an anomaly. Who is this guy? So, but to say that was so minuscule, so minor to the amount of love and acceptance that I got, I never experienced before in my life. That's what people have to understand. And it's not only me. I've talked to other Black Jews, right, who may have had some issues and said that on the flip side, they never been more welcome, more accepted, more loved in their life from their own communities that we grew up in our life. I didn't know what love was. I didn't know what kindness was until I became a Jew. I never knew what that was. I may have thought I knew, but I didn't know what that was. So experiencing those things were always offset by the abundance of love that I was getting. So it wasn't that I never experienced anything. However, being here in Israel, like to say that that's the type. First off, I tell people this all the time. Maybe Israel's maybe 28 to 30% something European, honestly. Mostly everybody else comes from Mizrahi, Arab countries, Yemen, Ethiopia. You have people, it was the most diverse place, probably in the world for the amount of volume of where we are. And I think what happens is that people, they see things on the news, or they may see Jews who are, white passing. I always use the word white passing because, they weren't white enough for Hitler. You know what I'm saying? So I say white passing. People see that and they automatically begin to or interpret that these are Jews, and it's really not that. Judaism in Israel in general is a colorful place. I remember, back when I met actually Ben Gavir, and they were all calling him racist. That's like the number one thing anybody likes to do when they want to. Like, the guy's dark. He's dark. What's he racist against? He's also shachor. What are you talking about? He's a darky also, So I don't understand where people are coming from. It's so diverse here in Israel. The Ethiopian community, people that I've been able to connect with, my kids connect with everybody here. You come to my house on the Shabbos, there's every type of kid. There's Hasidic kids. There's Ethiopian kids. Everybody comes over. So, I think it's sort of like that thing, people are always afraid of the thing that they don't know. And as long as that the narrative outside is so loud and so strong, then it typically sways people. But that's not been my experience in Israel, that it is a racist place. So
amazing. Nissim, tell me about your HBO Max series. That's I don't know when it's coming out. I saw in your bio it says coming out soon. About your story. Tell me about that.
It's a very good thing to actually break the ice here, because we actually technically backed out of the program. Yeah. And I'm gonna explain it here. This is the first time I actually get to talk about it. And honestly, you get to hear it first. What happened is we did a deal with HBO. The deal was finalized. It was done. We had already started writing the episode. And I was working with a very good team, Sally and all that. And these guys are, by and large, the team is, just to say this for the sake of showing how much I'm not against the people. Everybody there was very Democrat, very left, very whatever. And I saw, as things are going on, that, there could be some issue, but not like politically. These people were amazing people that I was working with. Sally Richardson, Irwin, all these people were great. Moshe Kasher. Me and Moshe got into a little bit of like back and forth. It was Shakla Vatar. It was the brotherly love of fighting about, what we can have in there, what we can't have in there. And I was given a certain amount of what you would say creative control. There's big studios. They can't give you 100% creative control, but they are going to give you veto power and different things like that. But what I started to see from that fight was it was a little exhausting, right? The idea was somewhat of making a drama comedy of my experiences being black in Israel and all that, which is hilarious. If you can, there's ways to tell this story very hilarious, and I deal with hilarious situations. Just case in point, coming from the hood and trying to understand that just because you have stepped on my shoe, you bumped me, you pushed me, and you've cut me in line, all that doesn't necessarily mean that you want to box right now, like you're not trying to fight me, was a completely different you know what I'm saying, understanding
Yeah,
for
in
me.
Israel, that's just a regular trip to the supermarket.
That was that was just standing at the bus stop.
Yeah.
So these, there was some cultural things I had to get over coming over here. Being at a tish and Hasidim eating out of a plate with their hands and passing around after everybody else ate off the same thing. Man, I'm coming from the hood. I'm not. We're not. We're not doing. Man, you even wash your hands. So there was a lot of things that we felt and thought were entertainment, but there's that point of contention because everybody wants to be neutral. Everybody wants to be able to tell the Palestinian plight. They want to be able to tell it. And we were trying to do these things in a funny way. But as things kept progressing, and I knew that after it left with me and just Moshe arguing, this show is going to go into a room of writers, and there's going to be 10 people writing, and I'm going to be arguing with 10 people about different things that I didn't want in the episode. And if they don't come from an orthodox Jewish background, then I can end up fighting this uphill battle when I don't have 100% creative control, right? I can't 100% creative. But even then, the exhaustion of fighting over and over again about what's appropriate, what's not. I come from a Hasidic community. The way that women are displayed and showed inside of things also too are going to matter to me, as to where certain jokes can't be said. And I mean, I found it being much more of an issue. But we were already locked into the deal. So the next thing that happened was there was a writer's strike. In Hollywood that sort of put us on the back burner. So I took that opportunity really just to pray about it. It was a tough situation for me because my lawyer, Fred Tochik, who was my entertainment lawyer, who I adore. I love this guy. Even that's another thing. Me and him politically disagree on things, but this guy is definitely on one of my favorites lists of individuals that I actually really love. And so I was sort of in this place where I didn't really want to rock that boat, but I'd already bowed out of the series. Like I just didn't see a world in which this was going to work. And one of my biggest concerns was, how are people going to see Israel? How are they going to look at Israel? You know what I mean? Am I going to be able to keep this narrative in a place to where Jews or Israel are going to be looked at in a positive light? So that really, really concerned me. So after the writer's strike, we still think there's some budget issues at HBO. Things got kind of put on a sort of a pause. So for me, I was winning. I was like, I can't just technically back out of this here. We already did a deal. I've already been, whatever the case is. And so I think it was right after October 7th, a few weeks later, I got the call from them, just like, there's no way we could shoot this in Israel. We're going to regroup. So they came back to me and thought about shooting it maybe in New York and different things like that. And at that time I said, I didn't want to do the series anymore. It's important for me, and I say this now, and in between that time, there wasn't just them. There was other production companies. Sony Columbia reached out to me. I had a Netflix offer before that for my story. What's important for me is to keep the narrative straight. I can't portray something that's not. My kids were I had one kid that was getting rejected from school, and the reason why they were getting rejected was because of the color, and it was very clear, and I don't mind saying it now that it was out. But at the time, it was very hard for me because I didn't want that out in the public, that people are going to think that all Jews are just like these 4 or 5 schools that I just went to, that these people over here who are at the gatekeepers, that has not been my experience of Judaism at all. But if a narrative comes out, the news is going to keep pumping that one. They're not going to look at how many Jews took us in. I was homeless. I didn't have, like all the other stuff that took care of me over the time. That's never a sellable story. And so I didn't want and I don't want to put out things that are going to tell a lopsided story of something that's not real just for the sake of being able to sell something. So, as I said, and now we actually took everything we have maintained and own our own rights to everything, and we are doing the documentary independently. So, if anybody wants to help us fund it, then you're more than welcome to help us. But that's what we're working on now.
Yeah, that's definitely the move. You got to do it on your own, control it. Don't let them don't let them grab the narrative themselves and twist the story to the stories that they want to tell. And honestly, it's really important because these days the new battlefield is going to be in entertainment, and lots of guys like Ben Shapiro and his group are putting out entertainment. PragerU putting out entertainment. Lots of groups that are trying to do that for just, first of all, just plain conservative values, but also just on tough political issues or at least complex political issues like within Israel, etc. Or of course your story, which is amazing but has lots of nuance. Super important to tell, but you got to control it yourself. For sure.
The most important part isn't that, even though my story, even though it's juicy and it's great for entertainment, was the gangs and everything I came from. It was the fact that, man, I changed my life. I remember years ago being in the store, and it had been already years after my transformation. I think it was right before I made Aliyah. And I had a friend who was in the store, and he started crying when he saw me. We just started talking. Whatever. I was dressed as a Jew, but I hadn't probably had adopted at that time my full Hasidic lavush. I wasn't maybe wearing a long jacket. I don't know if I was going with a hat or whatever, not. But I remember saying the story, he started crying. He's like, man, I never seen somebody change so much. I wasn't talking the same. I wasn't walking the same. I had a completely different change of life. And that's because I had removed myself from that world. And I remember seeing that friend, and I didn't notice, I didn't feel the change take place. I was just there along the ride. I didn't feel the change take place, but it was something like that happening. It happened to him, but it happened to me, that to see the effect that had on an individual, it mama changed my life. It changed everything for me. Just to realize that one moment made me change everything. Is like I really have become a symbol of change for people inside of my community. And I don't know. I just think that these type of things are impactful, and I don't want to disturb that or distort that. That's the most powerful part of the story. And I want to, as my good friend Rabbi Fisher says, his yeshiva Matityahu, he says, keep the main thing the main thing. And that's why I think entertainment should be in. Yeah, big kudos to Ben and what they're doing over there at Daily Wire is like amazing.
Anyways, Nissim Black, thank you so much for being here, for sharing your perspective on the election, on how Black America is dealing with the modern issues, about your story. And I could tell you, I just want to share my perspective of you. When I met you, you walked in with your wife and beautiful family. And if you want to judge a man, the best way to judge him is to look at the family that they have around them, that they've built. And really, your wife really has like an aura around her of just kindness and happiness, and your kids as well. You guys walk around with that, and I'm sure that's why you're welcomed so warmly. Yes, despite some difficulties and differences, but really as a whole, you're welcomed so much by me, my family, and everyone else that you interact with. So, Nissim, thanks so much. Good luck. I hope you already voted. I hope you mailed in your vote already from Israel. I'll be voting. Sir. I'm going straight from here to vote my early voting on my way to my real office. But thank you so much for your time. Thanks everyone for listening. Make sure to like, subscribe, follow, check out Nissim's music on YouTube, on Spotify, everywhere you could find them. Motherland Bounce is an amazing song. He's got lots of great songs. Hashem Melech, which is amazing, with my friend Gad Elbaz. Lots of good stuff out there. Positivity. Keep doing what you're doing.
New album Glory. The new album Glory is out, so go stream the new album.
There you go. Check out the new album Glory. All right, everyone. See you next time.
Thank you guys so much. All right, thank you. Shkoyach. Sorry, I'm long-winded.
You're great.